Well, welcome everyone to today's webinar. Today we're going to be highlighting some new technology that can really provide you end-to-end visibility into that clinician experience on Cerner Millennium and other clinical applications. By ways of introductions, you have myself, Stacey Ladwinger, and I run marketing here at Goliath as well as product marketing. And with me, who's going to be really demonstrating the technology, is Avi Lipp, who's one of our senior technical consultants and works hands-on with a lot of our health systems that are deploying Goliath. Now, while we wait for a few more people to join, I'm just going to go ahead and go through some regular housekeeping. In terms of agenda today, I'm going to talk a little bit about who Goliath is and the unique value we bring specifically to health systems that deploy Cerner. We'll then go into some use cases as well as demonstrate the technology and how our clients have overcome challenges using Goliath. If you have questions, please submit them throughout in the Q&A box. We will stop and take them through the session, and we will also wait at the end and answer as many questions as everyone here on the line has today. One question we always get is, will this recording be available? Yes, within 24 hours at the end of this webinar, you'll have the recording in your inbox that you can review or even share with your colleagues if you think the information would be beneficial. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. And one thing I really wanted to start off with is speaking to the fact that Goliath has a very unique relationship and advantage with Cerner. So we provide end-user experience monitoring and troubleshooting software. And we are the only vendor that has a purpose-built module for Cerner Millennium. We are deployed in RHO, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that and why that's necessary to deliver full visibility into end-user experience. And we're also resold by Cerner. So if anything you see today is of interest, you can talk to your Cerner representative, and they're able to respond and answer as well as even purchase through Cerner itself. And this unique relationship with Cerner is something that's been going on for a number of years now. We have a long history serving health systems that use Cerner every day. And if you ask any of these health systems or others we work with, what they would sum up is because of the data and visibility that Goliath provides, they're able to deliver a better clinician and end user experience. It's really about the data and visibility that we're able to offer that allows them to respond to issues ahead of time, anticipate those issues, and even document them. And we do that in a very unique way. Often, when I talk to IT pros, they'll tell me, we've already got monitoring and troubleshooting software. But the reality is that they're using that monitoring software for very specific, singular IT elements of the infrastructure, whether it's looking at network, storage, maybe applications itself. Goliath technology is unique in that we are looking at end user experience, and we're identifying how each of those IT elements impact the user experience. So we're looking at the user and defining how they're experiencing the use of technology and then the impact those elements bring to them, providing you that end-to-end view. When you don't have that end-to-end view, and I'm sure many of you have felt these pain points before, what happens is you're only looking at individual IT elements. Obviously, I'm going to go to the next slide. And when you're looking at those individual IT elements, there's a lot of finger pointing. The network team might blame Cerner. The storage team might blame the network team. It's really the lack of visibility when performance issues arise that create that finger pointing and also leads to poor communication between IT teams, management, application owners, as well as end users themselves. There's clearly a gap of objective evidence and data that truly allows you to isolate root cause of performance issues and even anticipate those issues so you can get ahead of them. And what happens is many IT pros then are reliant on subjective end user feedback. And all of us that have been in IT for a number of years know feedback from end users is not enough. It just doesn't work when it comes to resolving issues. The reason for that is end users don't understand the complexity that technology delivers. And so they clearly can't talk about what the problems they are. And many even don't even report issues at all. apathy is set in until all of a sudden the IT survey goes out and now IT gets poor marks. People are complaining about sluggish systems and IT is caught off guard. And when we talk specifically around Cerner environments, the complexity and challenges are even more. There is a perception out there often, and we hear this from a lot of health systems, where because often Cerner is hosted in RHO, there's a direct connection between the clinician and Cerner RHO. The reality is very different. Everyone is typically going through the data center. Every clinician or end user is remote, logging in, whether it be through Citrix ICA or VMware Horizon's PC over IP protocols, creating unique connections into the data center. The data center then has a whole number set of technologies and back-end systems that is verifying use and directing use before it even hits RHO. There's other applications that are being used both on-premise and in the cloud. And so the reality of the situation is it's not a direct connection. Instead, there are over 20 vendors and IT elements that all come together at Logon time to deliver that clinician and end user experience. It's because of this complexity that third-party software like Goliath is needed in order to deliver visibility into what's really happening from the end user's perspective. And the reason third-party technologies like Goliath can provide you visibility into that is because of the way we're deployed. And so we actually have just a small piece of technology that will sit inside Cerner RHO. We also have that technology that sits at remote locations, so we can give you a full perspective and data end to end. And when I talk to many organizations about how we're deployed, their first question is, well, why do you need an agent in RHO? Isn't Cerner managing that infrastructure? Yes, they absolutely are. And we're not looking at the performance of RHO. Instead, because of the way Citrix is architected, we have a small technology that sits there leveraging the Citrix APIs so we can deliver you visibility into that end user experience. So we're not looking at the performance of RHO. Instead, we're looking at that health system's individual use and how user behavior occurs and impact of that behavior all around the experience by linking into the Citrix servers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. Now, before we jump into the technology, I want to talk about how everything I just said really has helped many health systems provide an end-to-end view of their clinician experience. Let's start with our first client here. It's Universal Health Services. And so when they first came to us, there was a number of clinicians complaining about session slowness and connection issues. They recently had an issue where Cerner was down at a Nevada hospital. Clinicians were complaining that PowerChart and Dragon Dictation were crashing. There were patients unable to get into their patient portal. So all of these were individual challenges, but Universal Health Services was struggling to identify root cause, and this led to a lot of frustrated users, clinicians, and medical staff. What they did is they deployed Goliath, they put us in Cerner RHO, and they immediately got end-to-end visibility across the entire environment. Because of that, they were able to isolate root cause of issues. For example, the reason they were having issues isolated to a Nevada hospital was because there was a bad riverbed device that was causing session slowness. It had nothing to do with Cerner. It had everything to do with their network device. They were also able to show that Dragon Dictation was crashing because of certain executable errors that were being thrown that they did not even understand until they saw them within the Alerts tab of their Goliath Technologies console. And Avi will show that in a minute. The other big thing was once they figured out root cause of these issues, they now use Goliath to proactively run over 15,000 logon tests to know immediately if there's a logon issue or a performance issue and alert IT so they can proactively address it before end users are even impacted. They have gone ahead and drastically increased overall clinician satisfaction by using Goliath. And when issues do occur, they're able to isolate that issue and really identify that root cause, often proving it has nothing to do with their Cerner applications or other apps, and everything to do with the underlying architecture that is providing those applications to their end users. Avi, with that background, do you want to dive into the technology and show everyone today how it works?
Certainly. So what I'll show here real quickly is a screenshot from a Cerner customer where within the technology, you have the Citrix virtual apps and desktop session display. And so for any Cerner sessions, you're able to see the specific application that is being utilized. So whether it's revenue cycle, power chart, FirstNet, and you're able to see all those applications right on the session display so that if you do see that a particular user is having performance issues, such as high ICA latency, you are then able to see the specific application that is being utilized and understand, okay, it's that user with that particular application that right now is encountering performance issues. Now, within the technology, where you would go, it's right on that same screen. I'll just dive right over into it, where within this tab, again, you're able to see all the Citrix sessions in your environment. So whether they're active, whether they're historical, we don't average or roll up any of our data. So you're going to get the same level of granular detail for a session that took place 2 weeks ago, a month and a half ago, as you would for an active session. So when Clinician Sarah is saying, hey, my Cerner experience has been poor recently, you can then be able to pull up all of Clinician Sarah's sessions and be able to see them right here. What you can often do is just be able to search for the user's name, pull up all their sessions, and then when you're ready to investigate a particular session, you just click on the user, and what will populate is a summary screen that has all of the high-level key data points that went into this user's session. So you'd be able to see the client endpoint, how that user connected into the environment, the delivery control that brokered the session host, which in this case, is in RHO. And then you're able to see details such as a high-level Logon summary breakdown, and then key performance metrics for any in-session performance issues. Now, you have all this rolled up onto the main screen, but you do have these dedicated tabs for logon duration, ICA and HDX connection metrics, where you can get insight into, again, round trip time, connection speed at that end user's location, so whether they're working from a hospital site or whether they're working remotely. Bottom left will give you insight into ICA channel usage to understand end user behavior, and I'll touch on that in just a moment. Then you have the application server. So in this case, the XenApp server that's hosting, Cerner Millennium or any of those particular applications. The processes, as well as the alerts and the event logs. So why don't we go through a troubleshooting scenario that was just described as far as where Universal Health Services, some clinicians were having performance issues from one of their particular hospital sites, couldn't immediately pinpoint where the issue was until they then looked into the Goliath technology. So in this particular case, it ended up being a riverbed device that was the error. And the way how you were able to quickly identify this is on the IC and HDX tab, you could see where there's high round trip time, which, as for those on the line, it's, anytime that round trip time is above, say, 350 milliseconds, around 350 to 400 milliseconds, that's when latency is apparent to the end user. So you could come in here and I can see that, round trip time represented here by this top left chart is absolutely above that caution line of 350 milliseconds. So you're able to see, okay, that user is having performance issues. The top right, you're able to see connection speed, which is the amount of bandwidth that is available for receiver or the workspace app on that user's endpoint, wherever that user is located at. So in this particular case where they're working at a hospital site, you can see the amount of bandwidth that is available strictly for Citrix. And it was very similar to this exact type of graph here, where you can see that there is a connection speed of 27 megabits per second, which is plenty to support a satisfactory Citrix and Cerner session. But when the user started having performance issues, they noticed that everyone's connection speed dropped significantly down to the point where there wasn't any more connection speed, in which case they were able to quickly pinpoint that it was the actual router at that location that was causing those issues. So it's no wonder when you see a drop in connection speed, okay, that there is an increase in round trip time, because there isn't enough bandwidth then to support that clinician's Citrix session. But that is just 2 data points right there to quickly pinpoint what the root cause is. You also do have this bottom left-hand chart where we're able to get insight into end user behavior. The way how Citrix is architected is that there are virtual channels that handle different functionalities depending on what that end user is doing within their session. So at the top here, you can see end user experience metrics such as audio bandwidth, clipboard bandwidth, thin wire bandwidth, which is the Citrix display adapter. And you can notice all these are inbound and outbound from the server perspective. So for example, if the audio bandwidth in channel is being utilized, maybe that clinician was utilizing dragon dictation and talking into their session. Audio bandwidth out, maybe that user was streaming some audio, some Pandora or Spotify within their session. Clipboard bandwidth, did that user have a large copy and paste job that hung up the session? Thin wire bandwidth, which is again the Citrix display adapter, was that user doing something graphically intensive within their session, maybe some x-rays or just a graphically intensive application. And based off of the type of bandwidth that is being utilized, you can then get insight into end user behavior and how that can be impacting performance. So in that riverbed scenario, you may see bandwidth going to the session host, but not seeing it then being able to return because of the riverbed error on the over at the hospital location. So it's an incredible amount of granular detail that you're able to see to pinpoint where the root cause is. Now, this is where you're looking at end user experience and the session performance as a whole. We'll direct you right to those type of issues where you're able to see within processes, was it an Imprivata process that was having performance issues, or any of the alerts in the event logs. So where for alerts, you'll see here any of the out-of-the-box alerts that we're already looking for hundreds of events, conditions, failure points, and thresholds, whether that's with a particular application or the OS in general, where you'll be alerted to any of these, or you can just have the technology document those alerts for you. And then you have the specific event logs, where you're able to then see, was there an Imprivata issue? Was there a particular, group policy event log error, where you're able to see any application or system error or warning events that took place during the time frame of that clinician's session. And I can flip back over here to the PowerPoint where, this has another screenshot example where you're able to see, a particular power chart process that was running hot and was able to then send an alert showing that, okay, this one exceeded the memory threshold. You get that real-time alert and they're able to start, resolving those issues before they manifest within the environment and become bigger problems. With that, I will pass it back over to Stacy for the next troubleshooting scenario.
Great. So I hope what you saw in there is when I spoke earlier about not looking at individual IT elements, we're truly looking at an end user has an issue. Now let's look back in and which part of the infrastructure were they interacting with at that time and which part was causing an issue. For example, the bad riverbed router. Now let's get into our next story. When we were working with Ascension, they were really looking at how do we make our IT department more proactive. They wanted to get ahead of issues and know ahead of time if anyone that was using Cerner Millennium was having any type of performance problem. And they had over 80 different hospitals, and they had a number of different applications that they were testing. Before using Goliath, what they were doing is they were literally having IT professionals go into the hospital starting at like 6 or 6:30 and log in and start opening up applications to confirm that things were available. As all of you know, hospitals never turn off. So it wasn't good enough to just log in one time early in the day. It really wasn't catching or predicting issues ahead of time. And so what they did is they deployed Goliath across all locations, and they set up automatic testing through the entire infrastructure to make sure that applications were not only launching successfully, but were launching on time. They have saved thousands and thousands of hours of downtime and slow performance by being able to get proactively alerted when issues do occur and resolve them often before clinicians or medical staff can even report the issue. Avi, do you want to show a demonstration on how they're using Goliath to do this in a proactive nature?
Absolutely. So again, the purpose of this technology is one of the proactive features where we'll have clients that'll have, say for example, Universal Health Services or Ascension, where they have a lightweight piece of technology that's deployed to all the different hospital sites, where it's just continuously launching Citrix and Cerner sessions to confirm that they are available for the clinicians. They have this run on a 24/7 basis. And I have a quick video here that'll give some context into that and show what's happening on the back end, where you can see the clinician would launch a web browser to the the Cerner sign-in page, whether that was actually a NetScaler or storefront sign-in page, log in with credentials just like an end user would. It would then confirm authentication, search for specified resources. So in this case, it's looking for FirstNet, and to test that, the technology finds it, opens it, confirms a successful presentation of it, closes it out, and then moves on to the next application. So now it's checking for power chart. And again, since healthcare is a 24/7 responsibility, oftentimes the hospitals will have this technology run 24/7, so that if there was an outage at a particular site, or there was just a failed launch in general, you're then able to get ahead of those issues before it could become a bigger issue for the clinicians. Now, once if you were to get an alert that there's a failed launch, where you go to analyze it is right within the technology, where you have the application availability analysis tab. This is the central monitoring configuration console for all those launches taking place across the environment. The page is broken down into two different sections. At the top, you have a high-level dashboard that shows where the blue bars represent the average launch time, and the yellow trend line shows the overall availability at any point in time. You can filter this based off of date ranges, the specific locations where these launches are taking place from. So, in the UHS or Ascension scenarios, there'd be over 60 different hospitals listed here. And then the specific resource that you're testing, so whether it's power chart, FirstNet. And then at the bottom, you get additional details for each of the specific launches, such as the date and time of the launch, the resource, the location where the launch was taking place from, then ultimately whether the launch was successful or if it failed. Now you can see here that all these launches are successful. That's great. But say if there was a failed launch, you would see that represented by a red X at the specific stage where the launch failed. So say if there is a failure, you can click on this magnifying glass and you're able to see screenshot evidence and details of each step of the logon process, showing you exactly what would have presented itself to the end users. So say, for example, that there was a maintenance window overnight and some updates were made to power chart that's led power chart to not be published for the end users. What would happen is this technology runs its course. It would fail at the enumeration stage since that application isn't being published. So when the technology goes to click on it, it's not available. There's a failed launch. IT gets a real-time alert on this and then can get ahead of those issues before end users are impacted. We've been able to save well over 100,000 hours of downtime for our Cerner clients because of this type of technology. And I do have a screenshot of how this looks in a Cerner specific environment here, where I'll just kind of show the screenshots of what would have happened in that exact type of run through, where you see FirstNet or power chart as far as the application, and then each of the steps and details of each stage of the logon process. And with that, I will pass it back over to Stacy for our next troubleshooting example.
Great. So here's another client that we were working with, Children's National Hospital. And they came to us as they were really looking to meet new SLAs that had been put in place, where they were having 30-second initial logon times and 10-second reconnect times. They were really upgrading their on-premise VDI environment. They were adding in new virtual machines to overall improve that experience. And what management asked is, if we're investing in this technology and you committed to delivering better logon experience for our end users, how are you going to track that? So again, they deployed Goliath both in RHO as well as on-premise. And with our out-of-the-box reports, they are providing management with daily, weekly, and monthly reports proving that they are meeting those SLAs. In fact, they're exceeding those SLAs. Because of the data, they were able to have a successful new deployment of VDI. They used Goliath to narrow down where there were some bottlenecks in the logon process, and then they provided those reports. So ultimately together, working with Cerner, Goliath, Citrix, they were able to exceed a number of their goals, including reducing logon times by about 65%, keeping those initial logons well under 20 seconds. And they also reduced their VDI tickets by 71% by using a lot of that proactive nature that comes into Goliath. Avi, do you want to show some examples on how they were able to troubleshoot slow logons with Goliath, as well as some of the reports that they were able to use with management?
Certainly. And so with some of the tools out there, you'll get 6 to 8 different stages of the logon process when it comes to Citrix or Horizon. But with us, we'll give you over 33 plus different stages. And here's just a screenshot of within the technology where we're back on that session display. And as we went through, there's those dedicated tabs. So focusing here specifically on a logon duration tab, where you can see the duration of the logon. So in this case, it was well over 200 seconds. And then take a look at profile loads. You see that consumed the majority of the time for that logon. Drill down to the group policies, where you're able to see that the group policies took 190 seconds, and then to a specific drive mapping policy that took over 180 seconds. So that in this case it was incorrectly mapped. You immediately see where that issue is because you have the duration of each group policy and a Gantt chart to show you quickly where you should focus your attention, so that you then know exactly where you need to look to, what are the main contributing factors to a long logon time, and then be able to make the necessary corrections to reduce that logon time. So clients, say if they want to hit those 30/10 SLAs, you have the information that you need to be able to cut down on that logon process where you need to focus your attention. And we've had clients that have been able to cut down on logon times by over 80% because of this level of granular detail. Now, as Stacy mentioned, this is, within the technology, we're able to troubleshoot, on the spot, but there are a number of different reports that are leveraged for this type of information to be able to, plan and be able to identify, issues in general. So here's just one of our logon reports. This is the ZenF session logon duration report. We're able to see each specific stage of the logon process, how long that they were taking to execute, so the profile, the duration of each stage. You're able to see if it was an initial logon or a reconnect. And then we have a number of others, different types of reports where you can have, send this data up to Power BI or Tableau, where you can see the different logon times per application. So you can see all these different type of Cerner logon times. Per application. You can see based off of the logon times per day, session count per hour, be able to have this graphically represented, so that management sometimes will like reports like this. That was just one of the examples, so I will pass that back over to you, Stacy. I believe you're on mute.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
We did have a few questions come in. Please submit your questions. We're going to kind of wrap up here in a few minutes. We wanted to make sure that we left plenty of time to respond to what might be out there from the IT pros. But this is just to remind you, if you saw something that you're interested in today, this is purpose-built for Cerner Millennium. We are the only solution that is deployed in RHO, and you can talk to your CAE or your TSE from Cerner who can resell you this technology, as well as give you plenty of examples like we did today, where clients have successfully deployed Goliath to get that end-to-end visibility. So go to the next slide, Avi. Just the last point before we jump into questions is, if you do have questions or would like to see a demo or even trial the software, email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com. We're happy to respond to any technical questions or set you up with a free trial for 30 days. All right, with that, let's get to the questions. Alice asks, did you say you can deploy your technology in RHO? So yes, as I just mentioned, we absolutely deploy in RHO. It is not hard to get set up. We have a relationship there. So when clients go ahead and purchase Goliath, they just talk to their RHO contact. They add our small piece of technology into their image, and as soon as that gets refreshed, you're up and running. So it is not a complex setup at all. We have from Raj, we have VMware Horizon on-premise, which delivers our user Cerner Millennium. Do you support this architecture? Yes, so we have a number of health systems that use Horizon connecting into Cerner Millennium, so absolutely can support that for you. We have from Shane, how do you tell that the network is the issue? So maybe, Avi, if you want to pull back up the demo, we can go back in there. This is what Avi was showing you, and I think this comes up a lot, where typically we hear our IT pros, especially when they're managing the Citrix or VMware Horizon environment, go, I really think that this is a network issue, especially now with everyone working remote, if you have your clinicians delivering telehealth, right? But the network team will often say, no, everything looks good on our end, because they're only looking at that single IT element. So what Avi just brought up here is when we show you the connection speed, we are showing you uniquely how much bandwidth is available for that specific user session and how much bandwidth they're consuming based on user behavior. And you are not going to get this data from anywhere else. Again, the network team will tell you at a macro level, everything looks fine. But when you have a clinician that is accessing Cerner Millennium, maybe they're doing a print job, right? There's numerous things they're doing in their session. All of a sudden it drops because they run out of bandwidth. Avi, you want to talk a little bit more about the graphs here quickly?
Yeah, so the question was asking, how do you know if it's a network related issue? And so where you go to do that, you could do it right from the ICA and HDX tab. You can do it right from the summary screen, where you're trying to correlate spikes in network latency as the driver in that particular case to correlations with spikes in round trip time. So in that, this is the same session from previous, where at the end of the session, I see that there is a spike in round trip time. And at that same time, I see this with this network latency metric, which is real-time network latency from the ICA protocol. It's not an ICMP or ping-based test, but it's an accurate representation of how much the network overall, from the client endpoint to the data center, is impacting round trip time. So it's very easy to quickly identify right here. If I see a spike in round trip time, I also see that network latency spiking. I now know that it's a network related issue. And then where Stacy was going is that not only do we tell you, okay, it's now a network issue, that you need to focus on that end instead of any of the resources or resource consumption, but you then can get insight into, was it the bandwidth available at that end user specific location that was allocated specifically for Citrix and Cerner? Because you can then pinpoint with connection speed the exact amount of megabytes per second that was available for strictly Citrix, and understand, was that what was causing the network latency? So when network latency spiked, we see that there's a huge drop in connection speed at that user's location. We now know not only is it just a network related issue, but it's the connection at that end user's location that's the issue.
Hope that answers the question. Thanks, Avi. Actually, Avi, if you want to stay on here, we have another question I found that probably is good to be in the software. This comes from Jane. Have you ever proven that it's end user behavior causing session slowness, like running a third-party peripheral device? So the answer is yes. We absolutely have proven end user behavior is root cause, whether it's they're running an audio file, a video, a graphically intense. Avi, if you want to bring that up again, thanks.
Yeah, sure thing. So yeah, as far as for any peripheral devices here, you're able to see device ports. So, COM1, COM2, in case, they're hooked up for any printing, just as an example. You do have the USB bandwidth that's utilized for any peripheral devices. So if you see that there's high USB bandwidth that's being utilized, maybe there wasn't enough network availability at that location to support that type of usage. So then you can see, okay, USB was the issue there. As we mentioned previously, thin wire bandwidth is often which is the Citrix display adapter. So anything graphically intensive, you will often see thin wire bandwidth being utilized. So it gives you insight into what that end user was doing within their session and how that could have potentially been contributing to the poor performance.
All right. We have from Raj, we use virtual desktop and users are always complaining Teams is crashing. Do you have data to help me troubleshoot Teams? So the answer is yes. We actually have specific monitors for Teams. So if anyone's using Teams through their virtual desktop, you know that they have an optimization mode or redirection service. So we can actually alert you if those services are down and that someone is running teams in an unoptimized manner. And in fact, with our automatic remediation, we can automatically restart that service. So if anyone's having specific issues around teams and you want to be able to monitor and also identify, right, is it a teams issue or is it, a network issue, user behavior issue? We absolutely have clients that are using that today and can help you. All right, we have from Joel, we have a 30-10 SLA for logon times. Can we run reports to show our performance? The answer is yes. So we did show you a few of those reports that if you've got specific SLAs, we can absolutely run those reports. We're also able to show you, right? Sometimes we've been talking with users where they have the 30-10 if they're inside within the hospital, but if they have remote users, they can be a little lax on that SLA because they don't have full control over the environment. So in those reports that Avi showed, you absolutely can filter by, connected via or groups so that you can filter out remote workers versus those that are on-prem. Follow up to that, we've got another reporting question. Would any of your reports help me tell management the type of end user experience our users are having? So pretty much all of our reports will tell you how the end user experience is, but we have heard, especially with remote workers, more and more management asking for almost a dashboard view around what is our experience. Avi, do you have the end user scorecard that you could bring up? So this is a report that we have that will actually benchmark your end user experience based on industry standards. So at a quick glance, you can see this is an example of a pretty healthy environment where their overall score is 85 out of 100. But you will notice they're in the yellow range for network latency. So there's some network issues going on. From here, they can absolutely drill into those individual sessions and identify why they're yellow and ultimately improve that. So all of this is based on Citrix best practices, but you can configure those thresholds. I was talking to one client and they said, because our GPOs are so loaded heavily, it's okay to have a 2-minute logon time. And while I had a little heart attack that a 2-minute logon time was okay, they absolutely could configure this so that they could adapt those views based on their environment. Avi, anything you would add here?
That's just a great way to be able to quickly see the overall health of the environment. And then it's also helpful to be able to then see comparisons. So say as you make some changes within the environment, you can then be able to see how the environment, was it healthy and excellent based off the rating prior? Or say if it was previously just under the fair rating and then all of a sudden you make some changes that make everything, healthier in the environment, you're able to then graphically see how much of a difference that you were actually able to make.
So, and then to that point, a follow-up question was, we are also getting questions about our reports from our security team around user activity. Do you have any customers that use your reports to provide information back to the security and compliance teams? The answer to that is yes, and I feel like this is increased with the pandemic. We are hearing from our clients a lot more that whether it be the security team or the compliance team, they're asking for data around how users are using Citrix, when they're using Citrix. They're also asking, can you notice any anomalies in user behavior? For example, is anyone logging in at 3 a.m. that typically doesn't log in at 3 a.m.? Are they executing PowerShell scripts? We also have some that are enforcing Citrix policies. So for example, we have one health system that's actually using our reports because they have a Citrix policy that says after an hour of being inactive, a user should be disconnected just so they don't have a lot of open Citrix sessions. So they're running a report and we have a stat called inactivity map, and they're proving that they're meeting the policy because no one is inactive over 60 minutes. Avi brought up this end user productivity report. While it's called productivity and sometimes is used for that, many do use it for security as well. Avi, you want to run through the report and talk a little bit about the metrics we can gather?
Yeah, sure. So with any of these reports, they can be run on demand, daily, weekly, monthly, so that you can have them be sent up to different business line managers. Say if you want to have this report in your inbox at 8 a.m. each Monday, you're able to do so. where for this particular report, it's used for a number of different things that Stacy just mentioned, such as being able to get insight into end user productivity. But in this case, we're going to talk about how it's used for security, where, on the left-hand side, you're going to have each user, the client IP address, how they connected into the environment, so that you can potentially find anomalies where, say, the user typically always signs in from the same place, same time, but now all of a sudden they're having a 3 a.m. login from a different location. That could set off some red flags. You're able to see session start time, session change. So, Randy logged in at 9, session changed then at 5 o'clock. The different session states, whether it's a logged off, disconnected, or an active session at the time of this report being run. Duration, be 9 hours here. Interaction, this is the key metric. This is it's showing how productive a user was within their session. So it's compiled of a number of different data points, such as mouse click, keyboard input, generating ICA traffic, so that you can then get an insight into, okay, Randy was in a session for 9 hours, but he was actually interacting with it for 7 of those 9 hours. So he was inactive for 2. Max inactivity time was for 42 minutes. Maybe he stepped out for lunch. And then the percent interaction. So the 7 divided by the 9, he interacted for roughly 78%. Then in a Zen app environment, the published apps that were being utilized. Now, Stacy was talking about how this is used for security. We mentioned the client IP and how they connected in. But in that particular case, where again, you have these Citrix policies that for any time that a user is inactive for more than an hour, that policy is set to, disconnect that session. Where we have clients that are using it now, where, say, hypothetically, you have that policy and there's a max inactivity time for over an hour displayed here, that policy isn't working. So you now need to, be able to make the changes on the back end so that that policy is working as intended.
Great. All right, we have some more questions. I love when we have this interaction. Rob asked, how long is our trial for? So by default, our trial's for 30 days. We do offer a longer trial period if needed, but we can always have that conversation. One thing to point out with our trials, though, they are fully supported and free. So we often tell anyone that is trialing our software, test out our support, go to our support portal, look at some of the troubleshooting workflows and other documentation that we have and videos to really support you, because I think that's a big part of any type of journey. We have a question then from Aaron, how do you price? So we price based on IT element monitored. Again, we are sold through Cerner. So you are going to get your best price going to your Cerner rep. So please do reach out if that's of interest to you. Marilyn asks, how easy is it to deploy? This is very lightweight technology. As I mentioned, the deployment is really 2 parts. One is you contact your contact at RHO and make sure that we get Goliath in your image. So that way we can go ahead and get those user experience metrics for you there. Then for your on-prem, we can get you up and running really in less than 90 minutes. We have embedded intelligence and automation that automatically discovers your entire Citrix or Horizon environment. We identify every potential condition, failure point, or issue that could possibly impact user experience, and then using industry best practices from Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, Cerner, we'll go ahead and alert you anytime those thresholds are exceeded. So this does not take a lot to get up and running. You saw the architecture there, it's very lightweight, and really you can start collecting data as soon as that RHO and on-prem parts are put into place. All right. Joel came back. Do you average or roll up the data that is collected over time? The answer to that is no. So we do not average or roll up our data. So for example, in that end user experience scorecard, you can drill into that and you can see every user that made up that score. This is a big competitive differentiator for Goliath. Many of our competitors will roll up and they'll show you trends of information, which when it's green makes you feel great. But when it's yellow or red, you actually can't drill in to see which user sessions were making that score red or yellow. All right, we have from Kathy, how are you different from Cerner Lights On? This is a great question. As I talk to this, Avi, I think, do you have the slide that brings this up? So we're very complementary to Cerner Lights On. So what Lights On is really looking at is the overall user behavior, performance around the application. So very much looking at who logs in, when, is it being adopted, how's it performing as they're clicking inside the application, and response time. What we're looking at is from the user experience that's looking at the underlying delivery infrastructure, specifically a lot of those on-prem component parts. So everything that you showed and Avi showed today is really looking at the IT elements that make up end user experience, not the overall usage and behavior around Cerner Millennium. So we work really well hand in hand together. You can kind of see that here. Avi, anything you would add when you talk to clients about the differences?
Yeah, I think that you hit it right on the head there, is that they're used together, where if you're looking for, response time, adoption rate, anything like that within the Cerner application itself, Lights On is a great tool. But if you're looking for additional visibility into the, delivery of Cerner and the end user experience, that's when our clients would then, use our technology.
Okay. Because of it, we've got another competitive question. Charlie's asking, how are you different from Citrix Director and Citrix Analytics? So first thing that we're different on is they do not have a purpose-built solution for Cerner Millennium. They are not going to get you the level of visibility we are going to provide because of our agent being an RHO and bringing in that on-premise infrastructure. So right there is kind of the first differentiation. And then when you look at it, Citrix is only going to look at individual Citrix component parts, not all the elements that make up user experience. This is a great slide, Avi. Why don't you go ahead and talk through it?
Sure, yeah. With Director, it's a good tool to point at, Citrix being an issue or not being an issue. And, within that, everything that's not read on this screen, you'll get some visibility with Citrix Director. But as we all know, there's a number of different components outside of just Citrix that impact the delivery of the resources to the end users. You have end users who are logging in from different locations that have different bandwidth allotments. They're all using different client endpoints. You have the hypervisor layer. You have your actual VMs, the back-end systems. So, AD, SQL. Then you have the user devices, network devices, storage devices, printers. And then especially with healthcare, where you're talking about your EHR modules, where, we're talking about Cerner, where you need that full end-to-end visibility by being able to see what's happening with the servers in RHO. The Epic, we have a purpose-built module for Epic, all scripts, Meditech, and to have all these in one console to be able to quickly pinpoint, if an issue is with the delivery of these applications, if it's an issue with the applications themselves or end user experience, all in a single console where you can also look at that information historically, is where our clients tell us it's incredibly valuable. So anything that's read is the additional information, and not just limited to that stuff, but that's all additional information that you'll get with Goliath as opposed to Director. Great.
Thanks, Avi. 2 more questions. So if you have any other questions, please do put them in the chat. This comes from Lydia. Do you support Citrix Cloud as we're thinking of moving to Citrix Cloud? So yes, we actually have an industry-only Citrix Cloud connector module. So not only are we going to be able to monitor the health of your entire Citrix Cloud infrastructure, but we're also going to look at those cloud connectors and alert you anytime a connector is down or creating performance issues. And then through automatic remediation, we can actually restart those connectors as well. So if this is something that you are using today or you're thinking of moving to, either way, we can support you. And then last question comes from Todd. Our health system also uses Epic. Do you have similar capabilities for Epic? So the answer is yes. Cerner is a little different because it is hosted, so that adds a different dynamic, which is why it's so critical that we can have our lightweight technology in Cerner RHO. But we do have purpose-built modules for Epic, Allscripts, and Meditech, which provides you performance metrics not only from the underlying ARC infrastructure and user behavior, but those different EHR, EMR applications. And we recognize that that's critical. We've had a number of clients that have acquired another health system, and so they've got 2 parts. Some are using one health system for one type of patient care and another for another type of solution. So we recognize there is often sometimes these hybrid environments. Avi, do you happen to have our Epic environment up that you could show performance charts in?
Sure did.
Excellent.
Yeah, so as far as, with our Epic module, we're integrating with Epic System Pulse, so we're pulling in that data so that you have, the entire scope of the visibility from the end user experience, the delivery of Epic, and then the performance of your backend Epic application, where you're able to see information such as total counts, average grefs, the average block reads, DB requests, web requests, and then also the workflow latency dashboard. And so we have these based off of working with Epic and some of our mutual clients where, again, you're able to see workflow times, client CPU time. So it gives you, again, that overall visibility, especially as a Citrix admin, where sometimes you don't have access to System Pulse data. All in the same single console, you're able to get, the Epic System Pulse data as well as the delivery infrastructure metrics that we've touched on this webinar, all into a single view so that you can pinpoint, was it an Epic application issue or the delivery of Epic? And same deal with Metatech and Allscripts.
Great. I think that's the last question. Thank you for everyone that stayed till the end and also participated in the questions. It makes it a lot more enjoyable. As I've mentioned, if you have any questions, want a free trial, please email techinfo@goliathtechnologies.com and we can get you set up. Upon the end of this, when you close out, there will be a short survey. Please take the 2 minutes to fill it out. That information really helps ensure that we're delivering the best content that meets the needs that are attending our webinar series. And Avi, as always, it's a pleasure working with you today. So thank you for joining. And I thank everyone that joined today. I hope you have a great, safe rest of your day. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, Stacey. Thanks, everyone.